When he arrived at the suite with a diamond ring worth 45 million Nigerian nairas, he heard her voice through the slightly open balcony door. "I don't love him," Annabelle whispered into her phone. "I'm only here for the money. Once I get it, I'm out." Her laughter was cold. "He's too soft to ever suspect." Jason froze. The world went silent. His fingers trembled as his dreams shattered in a single sentence. He walked out quietly, leaving the ring box on the table beside her champagne glass. That night, he didn't confront her. He simply disappeared. Subscribe for more interesting stories. The city of Lagos pulsed with golden lights that night, every tower shimmering like a crown over the restless Atlantic. Inside his penthouse office, Jason F. stared at the reflection of his own success, a boy from Oja who had built an empire before 30. Yet beneath the calm perfection of his life ran a quiet loneliness, a longing disguised as discipline. He believed Annabelle was the answer: elegance, laughter, and promise all wrapped in silk. Tonight was supposed to seal their destiny, a story he had planned down to the scent of the roses and the rhythm of the violins. He spent weeks crafting that evening like a painting, candlelight reflecting off crystal glass, a dinner by the skyline, and a ring that held both his wealth and vulnerability. Jason wasn't naive. He'd seen greed dressed as love before, but Annabelle's charm felt different. Her laughter melted his caution. She had this way of touching his shoulder when she spoke, as if anchoring him to something real. In her presence, he felt like a man discovering home after years of wandering through empty mansions. He wanted that feeling to last forever. Lagos traffic roared below as Jason adjusted his tuxedo, his heart thrumming louder than the city. His driver waited downstairs beside the Maybach, engine humming softly. Jason picked up the velvet box containing the diamond ring, staring at it with the awe of a man holding a piece of eternity. The ring wasn't just an ornament. It was an unspoken vow, a surrender of pride. He wanted to give her everything: his empire, his peace, even his surname. What he didn't know was that love, when misplaced, can become the sharpest weapon of all. The Echo Pearl presidential suite glowed like heaven above water, chandeliers dancing over gold, wine breathing in crystal, and Lagos spread like a dream below. Jason had arrived early, wanting every candle perfectly aligned, every petal exact. When he heard the elevator chime behind him, his pulse quickened. But it wasn't her footsteps, just a waiter setting the final touches. He smiled faintly, nerves and joy wrestling inside him. Then, from the balcony, he heard her voice. Soft, familiar, cold. He froze by the table as the words floated through the half-open balcony door, casual, venomous, alive. "I don't love him. I'm only here for the money. Once I get it, I'm out." The tone was careless, laced with mockery. For a moment, Jason thought it was a joke, a misunderstanding, a rehearsed line for someone else. But then he heard her laugh, that cruel, detached sound that didn't belong to the woman he adored. It sliced through the air like glass. His vision blurred. The world went still. He didn't rush out to confront her. He didn't break the door or shout her name. Jason simply stood there, every heartbeat echoing like footsteps toward an execution. His fingers trembled as he reached into his pocket, pulled out the ring box, and placed it gently beside her untouched champagne glass. The petals around it looked suddenly like stains. He took one last breath, a silent goodbye to the life he thought he was living, and walked away without a word. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream. By morning, Jason F. was gone, vanished from her orbit as though he had never existed. His phone lines were dead, his office unreachable, his staff instructed to remain silent. Annabelle woke to confusion and mild irritation, assuming it was one of his dramatic tests of loyalty. She had no idea that her casual betrayal had shattered something sacred, not just love, but faith in humanity itself. Jason spent the next week in a quiet villa outside Abuja, watching the rain slide down the glass, feeling the numbness crawl over his soul like fog. He didn't cry. Not once. He simply existed, observing the fragments of his old life scatter into memories. The image of her whispering those words haunted him, looping endlessly until it lost meaning. What hurt most wasn't that she used him. It was that he had believed she couldn't. Love had made him blind, and blindness was expensive. When he finally returned to Lagos, it wasn't the same man who had left. His walk was slower, his smile quieter, his eyes sharper, the kind that see through masks without effort. Weeks later, Lagos fell in love with a lie. Annabelle Musa became an online sensation, the face of young love goals, the self-proclaimed queen of luxury. She flaunted handbags worth fortunes, posted cryptic captions about loyalty and blessings, and posed in front of cars she didn't own. The city adored her. They wrote headlines calling her the woman behind the billionaire. But Jason watched from the shadows, expressionless. Every post was a performance, every like, a mockery. The same city that once worshipped his success now worshipped his deception. Annabelle didn't know that every gift she received, the cars, the house, the jewelry, all came from him through invisible hands. He had set up shell companies and hired discreet agents who made her believe she was finally winning. She smiled for cameras, oblivious that each luxury was a thread in the web he was weaving. Jason's silence wasn't weakness, it was design. He wanted her to taste abundance until it became her prison. And soon, it would. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it hums beneath the melody of celebration. Jason spent his days quietly rebuilding. He sold a fraction of his company shares, masked under different corporations, to create funding trails that led directly to her accounts. Every transaction seemed legitimate: brand endorsements, modeling deals, fake investors. Annabelle believed she was the mastermind of her own success. She even bragged to her friends about manipulating rich men. Jason's satisfaction wasn't in watching her fall, it was in watching her climb a ladder made of smoke. The higher she went, the harder she would hit the ground when the wind shifted. Jason's plan was not born from hatred but from precision. He had no interest in public vengeance or scandal. He wanted something deeper, a lesson sculpted in silence. He began surrounding Annabelle with illusions: a talent manager who was his former assistant, a luxury agent who worked for his company, even a brand investor who answered directly to him. Every path she walked led back to Jason's quiet control. He studied her through reports, her spending, her messages, her growing arrogance. Betrayal had become his laboratory. Emotion had turned to experiment. Meanwhile, Annabelle enjoyed her newfound fame. She hosted charity galas for social media, wore designer gowns, and gave speeches about staying humble. She didn't notice the cameras fading, or how quickly people shifted their attention once her novelty wore off. Jason made sure small cracks appeared: a delayed payment here, a rumor there, just enough to make her chase bigger deals. The hunger grew inside her like thirst in a desert. That was when he introduced temptation, a phantom investor offering her the dream of global expansion. The proposal came through a glittering email: an international investor seeking partnership for a luxury fashion line in Dubai. Annabelle's heart leapt. It was everything she'd ever wanted: recognition, travel, validation. She called her few remaining friends, bragging about the deal, unaware that every response she received was being monitored. Jason watched from his office as she prepared for her big moment. He didn't feel joy or hate, only quiet fulfillment. She was about to walk into the final act of a play she didn't know she was starring in. The day before her flight, Jason visited the construction site of a new charity school he was funding in Oja. The sound of hammers and children's laughter reminded him of what pain could build when guided correctly. He smiled faintly, signing a donation slip under her name: Annabelle Foundation for Girls' Education. No one would ever know. It wasn't forgiveness, it was irony. The world would associate her name with goodness long after her truth collapsed. True power, he realized, wasn't in revenge, it was in authorship. He was writing her destiny line by line. Annabelle boarded her flight to Dubai with excitement, unaware of the storm awaiting her. She posted photos of champagne and window clouds, captioned "Global Takeover Loading." Her followers cheered. Jason's team received confirmation of her arrival and prepared the suite where the final revelation would unfold. The walls of deceit had been built carefully. Now, they were ready to echo. In Lagos, the night fell softly over the ocean. Jason stood by his office window, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere between pain and peace, he whispered a silent goodbye to the man who once believed in love. Dubai glimmered like a golden mirage, a city that never slept yet never blinked. Annabelle stepped out of her black limousine into the desert heat, her heels clicking like applause on marble. The Burj Khalifa towered above her, a symbol of everything she craved. She believed destiny was finally aligning, unaware that it was merely circling back. The lobby smelled of roses and ambition. As she rode the elevator toward the top-floor meeting, her reflection shimmered on the mirrored walls, confident, flawless, hollow. For the first time, she was about to meet the architect of her illusion. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a suite drenched in sunlight. At the far end, facing the skyline, sat Jason F., calm, collected, reborn. His navy suit contrasted with the beige horizon behind him. Annabelle froze. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Everything around her blurred except his stillness. She tried to smile, to gather words, but the silence consumed her. Jason simply gestured toward the file on the table, the air between them dense with irony. She didn't know yet, but that file held the map of her entire downfall. Annabelle's trembling hands opened the folder. One by one, the documents unveiled her fantasy. Shell companies, forged contracts, investment trails, all leading back to Jason. Every car she flaunted, every mansion she claimed, every bag she bragged about was bought by him through invisible threads. Her image of success had been financed by the man she betrayed. The truth struck her like cold water. The walls seemed to close in. Jason didn't raise his voice or smile. He just watched her drown in realization. Revenge wasn't a knife, it was a mirror. And she was finally seeing herself. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of exposure. Every line she read dismantled another illusion. There were signatures she thought were hers but weren't, bank transfers she never noticed, and secret ownerships that vanished overnight. The empire she believed she had built had been nothing but smoke. Her reflection on the glass trembled with shame. Jason remained silent, his eyes devoid of anger. For him, this wasn't cruelty, it was closure. He had given her everything she ever wanted, just to show her how meaningless it was without truth. By evening, the news broke across Lagos. Annabelle Moose's empire had crumbled. Her accounts were frozen, her mansion reclaimed by banks, her cars towed under court orders. Photos of her crying outside a Dubai hotel flooded social media. The same people who once adored her now mocked her captions, calling her queen of borrowed thrones. The world devoured her downfall with savage joy. Jason didn't comment. He didn't leak anything. He had simply turned off the switch. The system he built to empower her had now erased her with the same efficiency. Silence became his signature. Annabelle spent days hiding in a small hotel room, scrolling through messages of ridicule. Brands withdrew contracts. Friends blocked her. The same fame that lifted her now fed on her misery. She kept replaying the moment Jason's eyes met hers, not with hate, but with calm indifference. That was what hurt the most, his peace. She had expected anger, confrontation, maybe even pity. But he gave her nothing to hold on to. The absence of emotion was the sharpest blade. It made her realize he had truly moved on, beyond her, beyond revenge. Jason returned to Lagos that week, the city's heat wrapping around him like memory. He didn't celebrate or boast. His revenge had already fulfilled its purpose, not to destroy her, but to destroy the version of himself that loved without boundaries. He resumed work quietly, the world assuming he had simply been abroad on business. His staff noticed a change. He laughed more easily, listened more deeply, and no longer chased perfection. Sometimes healing doesn't roar. It whispers through the ordinary, reminding the heart that power lies in letting go, not holding on. Late one night, Jason sat in his office overlooking the lagoon, the same skyline that once witnessed his heartbreak. The ring he never used lay on his desk, now dull from months of silence. He turned it slowly between his fingers, realizing it no longer symbolized loss, it symbolized lesson. Betrayal had taught him what love could not, to discern between affection and appetite. He thought of Annabelle not with bitterness, but with distant gratitude. She had awakened a sharper man, one who built empires not for validation but for vision. The pain had refined him. He began writing again, not business plans, but reflections. He filled pages with thoughts about loyalty, humility, and the illusion of control. Each sentence felt like therapy carved from truth. His assistant found him often lost in thought, smiling at nothing. Behind that smile was freedom. He realized that revenge without meaning was emptiness disguised as victory. But revenge that rebuilds is power transformed. He had replaced destruction with creation, rage with purpose. Every scar inside him had become instruction, a reminder that even betrayal can be a teacher if one listens long enough. Months later, Lagos buzzed with a new story, the launch of the F Women's Initiative, a foundation dedicated to empowering young girls from low-income backgrounds. Jason funded scholarships, mentorship programs, and business grants. What stunned everyone was its name, the Annabelle Project. The media speculated endlessly, but Jason gave no interviews. Only he knew the meaning, turning her name, once associated with deceit, into a vessel of hope. He understood now that the best revenge was rehabilitation, converting a wound into a doorway for others. The world applauded him. His silence remained his strength. Every school built under the Foundation's name carried a small plaque, born from a broken heart, rebuilt with purpose. Students recited it each morning, unaware that those words had once come from pain. Jason often visited these schools quietly, standing at the back during assemblies, watching children laugh without care. That laughter healed him more than success ever could. Pain had driven him to power, but compassion kept him there. The man who once sought revenge had become an architect of restoration. Love, he realized, could be redefined, not by who broke you, but by who you rebuild. A year later, the world moved on. Annabelle vanished from social media, rumored to be living quietly abroad. Jason rarely thought of her anymore. Life had softened its edges. He met Tara again, his former intern, at a conference in Victoria Island. She had always been the quiet observer, the one who stayed after hours to help others. Now she ran her own tech startup, humble yet brilliant. Jason noticed the kindness in her eyes. Not ambition, not pretense, just grace. For the first time in years, love didn't feel like a risk. It felt like rest. One evening, they walked along the beach at Tarqua Bay, the sky melting into shades of amber and dusk. Jason carried no ring box, no violin, no cameras. Just a seashell he picked from the sand, simple and unassuming. He handed it to her with a smile, a gesture small yet eternal. In that moment, he understood that love needed no witnesses to be real. The waves whispered around them, gentle and endless. Somewhere far behind him, the old Jason F. faded into the horizon, leaving only a man who had turned heartbreak into heritage. Jason returned home that night and placed the unused diamond ring in a glass case on his desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even betrayal can be art when handled with patience. The city outside glittered as always, indifferent yet alive. He leaned back in his chair, gazing out the window where his story had begun. Love had nearly destroyed him once, but now it had rebuilt him into something rarer, a man who no longer chased affection, but purpose. In silence, he whispered the same words that had guided his revenge: replace, don't destroy. Years later, people would still tell the story of Jason F., the billionaire who disappeared for months and returned a legend. They would talk about how he transformed betrayal into legacy, how his name became synonymous with integrity. No one truly knew what happened that night at Echo Pearl, but they felt its echo in every scholarship, every act of kindness, every life he changed. Somewhere across the ocean, Annabelle watched one of his interviews in silence, tears falling, not for loss, but recognition. She finally understood. The price of love isn't heartbreak. It's transformation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. Afrotales 247 will love to hear from you again. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on our interesting stories.